So maybe you've noticed I haven't talked about panning a palette in my big comeback, and that is because I, for the first time in, it's gotta be maybe five years at this point, I think it's 5 at least, I am not currently trying to pan a singular palette in my collection. It wasn't necessarily an intentional thought. What really happened was the single eyeshadows that I had put into my own palette that I had been initially like keeping track of and then fell off the wagon really fast. I will link for you up here the videos that I have with my most recent project pan that I was doing for a palette. But when the year came to a close, I was still very much enjoying that. And then all of a sudden I realized, oh, it's 2024 and I haven't really picked a palette. And then with my upcoming maternity leave, I was like, you know what, let's just forget it. I didn't wear a ton of makeup all the time when Lydia was first born. And I foresaw that being a thing with Logan. So instead, I have been really intentional about sitting down and using a different palette every time. And as I did that, I realized that Colourpop is the most heavily represented brand in my eyeshadow palette collection. In fact, I have 11 palettes from Colourpop. So I thought it would be fun, now that I have reacclimated and used all 11, to rank them, put them into a 1 to 11 ranking, 1 being the best, 11 being the least best out of the ones that I currently own. So hopefully that sounds good to you, and let's kick it off with number 11. The number 11 palette is my Colourpop Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer palette. This was a palette that came out 2 Christmas seasons ago or 2 holiday seasons ago, and I love this. Actually, I will tell you my favorite from this like genre of movies is Year Without a Santa Claus. It is my hope and wish and dream that one year for Halloween, I can be Heat Miser, my husband can be the Snow Miser, and then our children can be the elves, and Luna, our dog, can be the reindeer. Like, that's what I'm really hoping for. I'm really hoping to manifest that some particular year. But I put this aside the first year it came out. I wrote it off because I thought to myself, you know, I'm not quite sure the color story is really for me, and I did a good job letting it go. But then when it came around for this holiday season, I couldn't help myself. I asked for it for Christmas and I received it. And I have to be honest, there are some hits in here, some things that I like, but overall, my initial way I got myself off of this palette was that it does pull, rightfully so, into the red category, the pinky red category, and that just does not translate well onto my particular skin tone. I just look sickly with red. I also don't love like a true red on me because I have red hair. So even though it has some singular colors in here and I can see myself pulling out those singular colors, overall, I tend to pass this palette up a lot because it doesn't have an easy go-to array of looks for me to do. And that's a lot of my MO. I don't want to sit and hum and haw with a palette to figure out what I want to do for a look, nor do I want to have to pull in lots of different colors to be able to work with them to get a full look. So this is why it ranks number 11. The performance of it is good. It has good pigmentation. I like everything else about it. It's really just the color story for me. The tones, not enough tones work for me. Coming in at number 10 actually features my current eye look, believe it or not, and that is the High Tide palette. Most of my collection is these smaller 9-pan palettes that Colourpop comes out with. I find that these are priced just in a way that makes me be more willing to impulse purchase. This teal color story, this teal color is very much a part of the color wheel that I feel I look really good in. I'm confident. I have a lot of that in my fashion realm. So when this came out, I was like, oh my gosh, I absolutely want to have this. However, you know, your preference is, this is not a go-to palette for me. And so that's one piece of it, is that it is very bold. They're very bold looks. Like when I wear anything, any combo of shades that exclusively come from this, not mixing it with other neutrals, if I only pull from here, I always go to myself, wow, that's a lot of look for me. This is not something that I would pull for like going to my full-time job as a teacher. That would be, to me, too bold, too much, too in your face. But man, do I like the looks that I come up with. The other part of why I put it lower down is the performance. It is finicky. I find these darker mattes like Flora and Lunar and New Wave can be a little bit patchy. I have to work hard to build them up to the opacity and to the top to bottom layer that they don't have those patchy places. I have to work at it. It's not an easy to work with palette. I have to have patience for it. I definitely think the performance could be a bit better. I get the end result. I like the end result, but it's just finicky. And so between the color story not being super go-to and the finickiness, this gets ranked at 10. In my number 9 spot, I have another collaboration that is similar to the Rudolph palette. This is the original Hocus Pocus Gather Round Sisters collaboration. This initially, just like the Rudolph one, when it first came out, I talked myself out of it the very first year, but I did come to regret it. I remember going back and watching other videos of this after it had already sold out and was done being restocked, and I found myself being like, you know, I'm a little bit sad that I don't have that. So when it came back around, when they did their second round this past Halloween season, I decided to go ahead and pull the trigger. And this is a lovely palette. I like that it has some neutrals in here. I like that it has nice metallics. It has different variations of shades in here, but I don't like that it does have two, I guess technically three or, no, it's got 4. I'm just lying to myself. There are 4 of those mattes that have the like craft glitter sprinkled through it. I do not like that type of shadow. I feel like Colourpop has gotten away from doing this type of formulation in their palettes. I feel like I'm not seeing as much of it because I always pay close attention, because that really kills a lot of the mattes in here, which is not a deal breaker for me if I am being honest, because I go through mattes much more slowly than I go through shimmer and satin shadows. So I do still like it, but I don't pull for it a lot. And that's because much of the mattes in this bottom row are just too deep for me. I don't tend to gravitate towards those, or they're kind of that like magenta, and magenta falls into that sort of red pinky category where I can do pink on my lids, but once I start to move pink or red into my crease, I just start to look sickly. Probably doesn't help that I'm so pale, so that definitely contributes to I'm pale, and then I've got this pink and red in my eyes, so now I just look like all around sick. So I don't wear it a ton, but I do find that when I'm in the mood to pull in multiple palettes or multiple eyeshadows, I can find 1 or 2 shadows to use for a look. So I don't get to it a ton. I do like it as a fall palette, but it's not bad. It just isn't universally enough for me to pull out all the time, hence it's number 9. The number 8 ranking is yet another collaboration palette that they did, which was the Harry Potter collection. I really love the idea of this. I will say, I think in hindsight, She Glam did a much better branding, packaging job playing homage to the Harry Potter industry, but this came out first. This was very exciting for me. And I actually, when going through first pulling out these palettes, I thought this would be in like the bottom 2, but here's the truth of this particular palette. I have pulled out of here a shadow that I've already hit pan on when I was going through and adding more shades to my custom single shadow palette that I had made for myself way back when. And here's what I'll say. Universally, this is not a go-to palette for me. But here's what I will say. When I look at this palette, I initially think like, oh man, it's not super universal. There's not a ton of go-to looks in here. But when I actually stop and look at it, there's enough neutrality mixed in to the palette that even though your eye probably is drawn like mine is to these darker blue-green shades, really there's a lot up here I can work with. However, I don't think of it very often. The other thing I will say is the pans, I did not realize this until I popped this one out, are very shallow. They are not very deep compared to other Colourpop palettes that I have. So I definitely think that I can get through a lot of these if I put a concerted effort in. So I like this. Performance-wise, it's a good performer. I like the things that I can accomplish with this. I just put this lower because I don't think of it very often. I write it off a lot in my mind, and it requires a bit more thinking. And oftentimes in the morning, Monday through Friday, I'm not looking to have to think. I'm looking just to be able to go, okay, I'll bing, bang, boom. I have my shadows. And so I like this. It's not bad, but it again doesn't break into my repertoire enough because the color story just is a little bit more thought requirement that I'm looking for. So coming in at number 8 is the Gone Metal. This is not my favorite type of packaging. I don't love the plastic. I like that I can see through. That's one pro, but overall, I find this packaging to feel very like cheap and chintzy. And I like the idea of this color story a lot. I think that the cool silvers in here, I really do love a cool silver lid look. It just, to me, goes with a lot of the fashion that I wear. I wouldn't consider myself fashionable, but it goes with a lot of the clothes that I wear. It's pretty neutral. I just really like the look of these shades. However, this ranks where it ranks because it is majority mattes, which I don't necessarily love. I do prefer the shimmers in here, and it is a little bit harder for me to pull. I do have to bring in something else. I think if this shade All In were a little bit lighter and more of that cream color that matches my skin that I used to lay down with, this might have ranked a little bit higher, but if I'm being honest, I have to pull other things in. And the First Class and La Baby, these are a little flaky, so I have to typically mix in a pigment, like a mixing medium, to wet this to get it onto my eyes. Otherwise I get a lot of fallout with it. So I am willing to put up with that because I just love the looks of this, but I don't think it's a standalone palette enough for me. But because it's neutral and it's kind of that go-to category, I do pull it out and use it pretty frequently. What edged it out though slightly, even though they're very similar color stories, it would be this Nets collaboration palette. So I guess I lied. I guess I have one more collaboration palette. The NBA collaboration that they didn't really excite me. I didn't buy it because I'm a big Nets fan. I'm not a basketball fan. But when I was going through that silver phase and the Gone Metal came out and I got it, it wasn't doing enough for me. So then I went back and looked at this when it was on super clearance on their website. And this color story, this is divine because it has that cool brown in here, which I initially I don't think have thought on my own when looking at like this palette. Yeah, it has some brown in here, but they're very almost like slate brown colors. This is a true like cool chocolatey brown and it looks so lovely. Again, I do wish that Bed-Stuy, again, these names mean nothing to me as a non-basketball watching person, but if this had been a little bit lighter, this also would be a palette that I probably would come to all the time. Again, the reason it ranks a little bit lower is it is a very specific type of look that I'm going for. I have to be, wearing something that goes with this, or I have to be wanting that silvery type of look. This is not just, I have a bunch of different neutral go-to looks in here. I kind of end up with similar vibes no matter what direction I go in. I like this palette. I do think it's good, and I definitely wrote it off because it's the NBA collaboration. But if that were not a part of this particular palette, it would probably have gotten on my radar much sooner. Ooh, here we go, getting into the top 5 palettes. Super exciting. Let's talk number 5, and that is the Going Coconuts palette. This is a palette that I resisted for a super long time. I kept hearing about it. I feel like it had a ton of buzz. I think it's one of those palettes that had a real cult following, and yet it still gets talked about. I don't think it's as buzzy as it used to be, but I still hear people coming back to this, loving this palette. But it is a bit warm. I know it's marketed as a neutral palette, but it is a warm palette for me, about as warm as I like to get. But I have to say, the colors in here are lovely. I really appreciate in this center row, center shade, the Cocoa Crush. Ooh, that is just like liquid metallic on my eyes. Palm Reader is also so nice. The mattes in here are easy to blend. I like this a lot. Only reason why it ranks number 5 is because it does not have enough versatility, and I have to be wanting something warm, which for me is not all the time. And lastly, I got to bring in something else for that cream. This one, this shredded shade, is a little bit more than my skin tone, so it's not universal enough, but it has a lot of good basics in here that I can reach for, and I do like the looks that I come out with. Plus, I do find that the colors are very rich and easy to work with, so it checks off a lot of boxes. Remember when I said many palettes ago that that was my last collaboration? What a pack of lies I fed to you, because number 4 is from the Star Wars and Mandalorian collaboration. I'm not sure. This is a clear, your girl's not getting enough sleep at night. We're doing, I'm exclusively breastfeeding, and we're doing like every 3 to 4 hours of sleep before Logan wakes us up. So this is clearly impacting my brain cells. But number 4 is the Star Wars Mandalorian palette. It's the child palette. I believe they have more than one, but this is the one that I am really into. It is this. Oh no. The Force is not with me. The Force just totally fell out of the palette. Like, not the pan, just the actual powder. I'm devastated. That is so sad. Okay. We're gonna move on from the tragedy and maybe rebuy this palette. I don't even know if it's still available. I'm so sad. Okay. Pull it together. Here we go. So I love this palette, which is surprising because it leans really green, and I wouldn't consider myself a green girl. I wouldn't be like, you know what I do? I wear a lot of green eyeshadow. But for some reason, I wear this palette quite a bit. It is surprising, or at least in the sense of this being a colorful palette for someone like me, that it breaks through so often into my routine or repertoire of using, because I love it. I think it's so pretty. There was a series of videos I filmed not too long ago where I was wearing some shades from here. I just love it. I love that I can do the brown so well with the like greeny, grungy, metallic gold. I love the greens mixed with that. Like it's a well-balanced palette that I feel like I can do some go-to looks with. Granted, now that I've lost the Force, it does make it a little less universal, but I know I have that shade in other palettes, so it's not like a huge deal. I'm just a little bit gutted about the loss, the raw moment I'm having with you. But if I can rebuy this and replace that shade, I probably will, because it is a cute palette packaging wise, but also I just like the looks that I can get from this. I like the pigmentation. It's not hard to put together looks for. It blends really well. So it really is worthy of the number 4 slot for me. Ooh, we got our top 3 finishers. Number 3 would be the Making Mauves. I'm a little bit wary to flip these open and show them to you because I don't want any more shades to be falling out. So I'm gonna be a bit more gentle with it and just sort of tilt her like this. But this palette, oh my gosh. When this palette first came out, I was like, don't get it. Don't get it. You don't need it. You don't need to have more eyeshadow palettes. Like, stop it. But honestly, this was, in my opinion, when we started to get the wave of more, the tides started to shift towards the cool tone land. And it was so lovely to swim in the cool tone palette pond because I just was so over all the warm palettes, and I'm just not a warm palette person. And so this palette, I love. I will admit that even though I complained about it with previous palettes, all roads kind of lead to the same look, but I don't fault that with this one because I like the tones that I get in here, and I appreciate that it doesn't read as being too sickly pink. Like, it doesn't go too red, it doesn't go too magenta. It really just is a lovely combo. And this middle row, this looks like crushed metal on my eyes. I do mix this with a liquid when I put it onto my lid, but I just love the way it looks. I reach for this palette a ton. I wear it a ton, and it blends seamlessly. It just works. It's an easy, no-brainer palette for me, and I love that. Number 2 palette will be the That's Taupe palette. Oh man, when this palette came out, I thought to myself, a palette made for me and for me alone. I've actually panned the center shade here, which I'm pretty sure was the inspiration for this entire collection. I think it was the Couche super shock, and then the snake eyes, those two together were the inspiration or the like jumping off point for this. But I've actually panned snake eyes. I had a single shadow of it in my single palette, and I loved it. What I love the most about snake eyes is that it's one of those I can wear anything. It matches anything, any article of clothing I put on my body, this goes with it. Anytime I wanted any kind of bronze, this is the color I go for. And what I love about it is that the top row here, these are also really basic, really easy to put into my crease. These bottom ones are easy to darken it up a little bit, or just to go for a whole dark crease. Like there's any combination I like. I will say, kind of like making mauves, all roads sort of point into the same direction, but they're not the exact same look. There are like different depths and slightly different tones that you can come with outcomes for. And if it weren't for my number one palette, I could absolutely see myself panning this, and I could probably have more pan or dip showing in this palette if I didn't have that number one. So are we ready? Little drum roll. My number one ranking Colourpop palette is a mega palette of all things, and it is the Rock Candy palette. Oh my goodness. This palette just, it has everything I could want. In fact, you'll notice that there are 3 shades missing from here, and that is because when I basically depleted my single shadow palette that I made of mattes, this is where I came. I came here to get more of the mattes I needed, and then I have panned some of the mattes that you see missing here. I think I've panned 2 of them. Maybe, I could be lying, but I have pulled these out and I've used those 3 all the time. This is the palette that if I could only keep one of these, it would be painful, but it would be this one. And here is why. It has every, as you can see here, column type of go-to look I could want. If I wanted a silvery look, oh look, here it is. If I want something pink, got it here. If I'm looking for more of that like peachy leaning salmony type of look, don't go for it very often, but it's here in case I want it. Then I have the gold and bronzy ones, and then I have more of that like taupey gray grunge type of thing. Like it just is wonderful. Plus we have all the different finishes I could possibly want. I have matte, I have satin, I have pressed metallic or pressed glitter, I should say. I do have some of those pesky matte with glitters, but not that many of them in here. So I have all the finishes that I could possibly desire. This is a palette that if it had hit the market sooner before some of those other palettes had, I probably would not have purchased some of those. I love this palette, and I resisted it. When it first came out, I was like, you don't need it because you probably have these other colors. And I maybe do intermittently throughout my collection, and maybe if I like was doing more willingness to pull out a bunch of stuff to do my makeup every day, then I might have been able to convince myself to not still get this. But to have it all here in one place, convenient to pull out, it is one of those no fuss. I find that the looks are very easy to put together. I don't have to put much effort into blending it. It just is when I'm not thinking autopilot kind of day, this is where I come. It also is great where I don't always think through what I'm putting on clothing wise. I typically do my makeup before I get dressed. And so I then will basically pull this out and know that no matter what I do, it's easy to then find an outfit that's not going to clash with the makeup look. And so I'm just such a fan. And I think if I was willing to pan a palette in the near future, this would be the one that I probably would gravitate towards. I don't think I would aim to pan everything because I don't think every single shadow in here would be my preferred to go to, but it has 85 to 90% of my majestic little eyeshadow dreams. So it's just the best. So there you have it. I have all of my 11 palettes. I'd be so curious to know what you thought about my ranking, how you feel about these palettes, if any of them you have that are your faves. Let me know in the comments below. And I'm gonna get out of here and hop onto the Colourpop website and hopefully buy myself a new The Child palette, or at least find a shade that I can pop it in place of the one that I tragically lost during this ranking. I hope that you enjoyed hearing my thoughts, and I'll catch you in my next video real soon. Bye.